We need to support trade, discourage protectionism, and take forward structural reforms. And such continued international action is crucial not only to global prospects, but to each and every country's future. Now, over the last 2 years, we have been reminded of the force for good that governments can be in protecting people. The role of government is now equally critical in regulating the global financial system and putting in the right foundations for future growth, jobs and prosperity. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the crisis in the world economy started in the banking sector, so improved global financial regulation must be the key priority. Our first tests here in the UK came with the problems of Northern Rock. The government intervened to protect savers and to underpin the financial system. The unprecedented decision to nationalise a high street bank was controversial, as was our action later that year to recapitalise the banking system. And other governments right across the globe also acted to stabilise the financial system. And I believe this judgment has proved correct. In the United Kingdom, the latest figures from Northern Rock show it is returning steadily to normality. RBS is now being restructured and is rebuilding. Last week, Lloyds predicted a return to profitability this year. We will sell our shares in RBS and Lloyds, as well as Northern Rock, in a way that maximises value to the taxpayer and recoups the money we have invested. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we intend to get all taxpayers' money back. In the meantime, I can tell the House that the Treasury has already received over £8 billion in fees and charges from the banks in return for our support. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, at the pre-budget report, I put in place a one-off 50% tax on the excessive bonuses of bankers. I made it clear that banks had a choice of whether to pay bonuses or not. But if they did, given the amount of taxpayer support that had been provided, I believed it was right that the country as a whole should benefit. I can tell the House that this tax has raised £2 billion, more than twice as much as was forecast. This is money paid by the banks. Those receiving bonuses will also, of course, have to pay the income tax at their highest rate. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as well as supporting the banking system during the crisis, we need long-term reform to prevent excessive risk-taking. Under our presidency of the G20 last year, we put in place a plan to reform the international regulatory system. But we still need to do more to strengthen global banking. The G20 countries must put in place new rules on capital and liquidity by the end of the year. And we also need to reform remuneration practices to improve cross-border resolution for when banks fail and ensure international standards are implemented. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we cannot continue with a situation where the banks are rewarded for creating excessive risk, but the taxpayer foots the bill when things go badly. More countries now agree on the need for an international systemic tax on the banks. And this must be brought forward quickly, as I will urge the international finance ministers in Washington when they meet next month. And I agree with all those who think such a tax should be internationally coordinated. Going it alone, as some have suggested, would cost thousands of jobs, not just in London, but across the whole country. Global efforts must be complemented in each country with a drive to implement existing banking reforms as we are in the UK. As part of the reform of banking, I want to make it easier for everyone to access banking services. Since 2003, the number of people without a bank account has been halved, and I can announce today that we will do more to combat financial exclusion through a guarantee that everyone can have a basic bank account. And that will mean, over the next 5 years, up to 1 million more people will have access to bank accounts, something essential in the modern world. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we must be careful that as banks begin to return to profit, the sense of urgency around reform is not diminished. There could be no return to business as usual for the banks. But we must also remember that their success is vital not just for the global economy, but also for Britain's future. London is the world's leading financial centre. Across the country, the sector supports over 1 million jobs, including in Edinburgh, Leeds, Manchester, Cardiff and in other cities. A healthy, strong financial services industry is essential for our long-term prosperity. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the crisis might have started in the financial sector, but it spread rapidly to the entire global economy, underlining why intervention was essential. The impact has meant that the UK economy has contracted by around 6% over the course of the recession, and this compares to 8% in Japan, 7% in Germany and 4% in the United States. Businesses in the UK have taken painful decisions. Many families have seen their incomes squeezed. And given the intensity of the global storm, no government, of course, could prevent all jobs being lost or all businesses from closing. But I believe that governments have the ability to act, and I believe the responsibility to reduce the length and severity of the recession, which is why we took decisive action to stimulate the economy, cutting taxes for families and business, as well as bringing forward capital spending. We also introduced initiatives such as the car scrappage scheme to protect jobs and skills. And I can tell the House that this has helped drive an increase in sales of nearly 30% in the past year, this in the middle of a recession. These decisions, of course, have a cost, but the cost would have been far greater for families and for the economy if we had failed to act. For Mr. Deputy Speaker, we could have followed previous governments and watched from the sidelines. We could have listened to those who opposed all these measures last year. But if we had, I believe that we would still have been in recession. I'm also certain that the pain caused would have been worse and more widely felt. Indeed, in the recession of the 1990s, the rate of home repossessions was twice as high as now. That would have been the cost of abandoning families to their fate. Double the rate of business failures, that would have been the cost of failing to support businesses through this recession. And because of the policy decisions that we made, the Bank of England has been able to take decisive monetary policy action during the downturn. Interest rates have been held at record lows, below 1%, whilst they were at double figures for almost 3 years in the early 1990s. But more